This video is going to be some brief demonstrations of some of the techniques that we are going to use on Monday when we have our musician model in the studio. And I know there was some consternation for some people last week with the empty stage that we were dealing with in the Festival Theatre. So this week's mission is to collect some images of a performer. And I've been working with a couple of techniques that I'll demonstrate briefly now, and both of which are intended to generate as dramatic images as possible. Dramatic in the sense of perhaps spotlit, maybe emerging from the darkness and so on. Lots of tonal contrast and drama. So I'm going to do something with ink and wash and something on black paper with charcoal and some pastel crayons. So I'm going to draw with a sharpened stick and a pot of ink. This is familiar territory to many of you, and you'll know that if you want the ink to flow, it helps to point the stick down the way. The stick and ink, I think, has a real value for this sort of subject matter, because especially once you get out the wash and you start to apply tone, you can create very dramatic effects, ideal for theatrical subject matter. So you've got to get the ink flowing first. That's the first challenge, but not flowing too much. It's nice, decisive or decision-making technique. I'm doing purely lines, and I've drawn a bit of an outline to my musician's head. And then I'm really using the structure of his clothing, sleeves, waistcoat, and so on, to begin to construct a figure. I'm just having one go at this, but if you're a little bit nervous about too much ink, then you can actually let the ink dry out a bit and make some kind of grey marks, just with what's left on the stick. And it might be, for example, if I was going to go for features, or, I might do something like that, or pick up a bit of ink from somewhere else on the drawing. But I think the real virtue of this medium is that it requires you to be quite bold and live with what you get from the cooperating or not cooperating ink. So a line drawing first, and then I'll leave that dry, and then I'll have a go with the wash. So when we work in the studio, or if you're trying this at home, either you just wait, you have a pause, or you perhaps work on more than one drawing. So we'll probably organise the poses on Monday so that we return to poses and allow some of the ink to dry. So that's my line drawing. I'll put some wash over that next, and that will bring things together. And if there are things that I don't like, things that didn't work out exactly the way I wanted them, they may well be just absorbed into some blocks of tone, or I may find that I can have a third stage and put some colour or some chalk on top. So for the next stage, the wash, I have some dilute ink. It's very dilute really, because the ink is so strong, and a piece of sponge. And I'm going to look at my subject with my eyes half closed, and I'm going to put on some blocks of tone. So we've got dark trousers, and this, because the sponge is a fairly approximate device. I'm not going to worry, or I'm going to be quite keen on not filling things in too perfectly. And this stage, I think, should be done very quickly. I mean, if the stick and ink are meant to make you decisive, then I think this should make you even more decisive. So I've really just put in dark clothing generally, and then there's a little bit of contrast in the instrument. Then with the figure, the side of his hand, and then maybe the lower part of the face, a bit on the nose. And that's probably it. I think because we're doing performance and stages, it's probably worth putting in something of a shadow. Maybe I'll go for the stool as well. So that's it. That's really not even a minute to get that on. It's single strength wash, so again, that's just really means I've got to decide, is it dark or is it not dark? I can go back over a bit, and I can also possibly pick up on some of the ink line which didn't dry, so that can be quite nice to get that sort of slight bleed. But I think it's important to do this quickly and decisively, because that will unify your figure and really help with the drama. So let's leave that there. And just as a third and final stage, there's scope, once the wash is dry, to do a little bit of delicate modifying, refining, maybe introducing a bit more dark. So the wash surface takes charcoal quite nicely. So there might be a few things that I want, if I want that extra tonal range, and the charcoal can go on, and that of course can be rubbed out if necessary. I can also use chalk. So there are one or two places where my line was a bit thick. I'd like to soften that, find the musician's nose. I can put a little bit of colour on as well, and the kind of black and grey underdrawing will hold things together quite nicely. So those are refinements that you can make to the ink and wash process, which, as I've been saying, is intended to be kind of quick and decisive, but you can then make some slower refinements at the end. Another technique then that we'll try on Monday will be black sugar paper. And although it's black, actually you can work on top of it with charcoal, and those charcoal is darker in effect than black sugar paper, and so the marks that you make will be marks made in charcoal will be visible. So the guitarist has got his head forward, his head down, and his shoulders up. So that's what I'm looking for with that positioning, that posture. I'm doing the continuous line approach, so I'm just kind of exploring the pose and the figure. Working with lines first. Then I could do a number of things. I think I probably would do a little bit more tone, some filling in, as I did with the wash, of dark areas of clothing. But I can also fairly quickly jump to the lighter contrast. So with my eyes half closed, I can put just a little bit of chalk on different parts of the head. The figure, he's got some on his shirt. And this is quite interesting to do because obviously my paper background is much darker certainly than the background in my reference photograph. So I can actually, contrive. I can create the impression of a figure in a dark space if I take care to in a way restrict or limit the amount of chalk. So I think that's got some merit, some effect there. I wouldn't quite stop there, but certainly in terms of the contrast, I could stay fairly close to what I've just done. It is quite nice as well to smudge this chalk, especially I think with things like heads and hands, maybe elsewhere. As I smudge it, I get a better gradation from the white through to the black paper, and then I might even go back and put on something slightly sharper for particular places that I want to stand out more strongly. And I suppose with this subject matter, it may be the position of hands and fingers are important for the guitarist, or if it had been a metal instrument, maybe some of the shiny parts would be restated. So that's just staying with black and white, but I've also got the scope to, as well as getting a bit darker, to introduce some colours. And perhaps a feature of this low level lighting, or the dramatic stage lighting, is there's not a lot of colour. So the guitar wood has its own particular colour, and I can use this brown pastel in the way that I've been using the chalk. I can smudge it in places and let the black show through, or I can put it on a little bit more crisply to get a sharper edge, and maybe I can use some of that warmth also in the head and hands. So this is almost a kind of 3-color drawing technique, where the 3 colors are black, white, and a warm brown. And so as well as dealing with light and shade, I can also deal with temperature, and I can get some mixtures. The black and the orange will give me a certain brown, and the orange and the white will give me some quite good sort of warm flesh colours. But again, like the work in ink and wash, I think the value of this can be if you do things quite quickly, and in your drawings manage to get the essential elements of your performer dramatically lit. So on Monday we will have Simon in the studio. I will record, it'll be on Zoom as well, and I'll record the session so you could come back to some of those images and try some of these techniques. Okay, so see you then.